The sky was low and yellow with dust when he first saw it, against a shape against the slope, still as a rock, where the dead trees angled like broken ribs. Joel had paused at the rusted fence line to check on a noise he hadn't quite heard. That's how most things came to him now, not through sound or sight. But the suggestion of it, like memory echoing off old bone, it wasn't a dog at first, not to his mind, still too wide in the chest, and too wrong in the way it waited, like it knew the wind had shifted and he would be there. He stepped closer, careful over the dry nettles. The ranch had long since given itself back to dust and bramble, except this clearing near the southern slope. That's where they buried them. First cattle, then his brother, then her. The shape lifted its head slowly, tongue hanging. Years back. Joel stopped breathing. The animal in front of him was coated in road dust and old burrs, one paw raised off the hot ground like it had forgotten how to walk. Its coat was black mottled with brown, but the muzzle had grayed just like it had, years ago, the day she stopped chasing birds and started watching them instead. The eyes were worse, still the same liquid amber, but dulled around the rim like river stones. To knowing he opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The animal took a step forward and laid something gently at his feet. It was a piece of cloth, dried, shredded, stiff. But when Joel bent, knees popping, he saw the stitching hand, stitched blue thread, uneven. His wife had sewn it for the dog back when winters were bad and the farmhouse still smelled like firewood. A pouch for carrying things. Joel stared at it, feeling heat rise behind his eyes. No, he whispered, half to the cloth, half to the dust, and half to something deeper he didn't want to name. The wind kicked up, and the animal blinked slowly, tilting its head. Joel stepped back. The thing in front of him looked too much like her, but it wasn't. The back leg dragged slightly. Wrong knee. The eyes were cloudy, too soon for cataracts, and her ears. He remembered the torn edge from that barbed fence. This one's ears were whole, but still, it stood like she used to. Front low, weight evenly split. Waiting, not asking. Joel dropped to a crouch. The movement made the animal stiffen, tail twitching once he didn't reach out. He just looked. Where'd you get that? His voice cracked like split wood. Where'd you come from? No answer, of course not. But the animal didn't run. It circled once, slow, then sat right there, on the edge of the place where Joel had buried her 7 years and some months ago, under the stones she used to sun herself beside. He hadn't touched the spot since couldn't bring himself. The sun fell lower, staining the dry sky the color of rusted tin. Joel's boots crunched as he shifted his weight. He reached toward the pouch, half afraid. It was stiff, but something clinked inside. He unrolled it carefully. A key bent slightly. Not one he recognized. And beneath it, tucked into a corner, was something even darker. A sliver of paper, water-damaged and almost brittle. He unfolded it slowly. There were just a few words, in tight cursive. Still waiting by the steps, Joel felt the hair on his arms rise. He looked up sharply, but the animal was gone. Not gone like it had run. Just not there anymore. The dirt where it had sat was still warm. Paw prints fresh and uneven. He followed them for several paces before they vanished into hard ground, where nothing had held moisture in months. He didn't call after it. Instead, Joel walked to the stone where she was buried. The wind had brushed off some of the dust. The corners of the headstone were chipped. He'd never meant for it to last forever. He sat beside it slowly, back creaking, the key heavy in his palm. The silence pressed in, thick and intimate. Somewhere, in the distance, a crow called once and then fell silent. The wind shifted again, and with it came the faintest scent like old wood smoke, faded chamomile, and damp fir. He closed his eyes, pressed the pouch to his chest, and listened for breathing. Not his, not the wind. Something older behind him. The gate to the north paddock creaked open. Though he hadn't touched it in over a decade, Joel rose slowly from the stone, dust clinging to his palms, the folded paper and rusted key still warm in his hand. He didn't look back at the gate, though it had clearly moved, hanging open now, slack on its hinges. The grass just beneath bent as if something had passed through. Instead, he walked toward it, not quickly, but with the deliberate weight of someone who hadn't taken that path in years. The north paddock had been closed off since before the drought. Nothing grew there now except dry thornbrush and wiry grass curling like brittle wire. But Joel's boots knew the path by feel, every shallow dip, every spot where the ground betrayed a softer memory of water. Halfway through the paddock, he stopped. There in the soil was the imprint of a paw, deep enough to be recent. The pad shape was broad, the edges clean, but beside it, overlapping, was something else, smaller, footprints in a line, narrow, unmistakably human. Bare feet. Joel crouched, stomach tightening. His eyes scanned the horizon instinctively, the way a rancher does. Even after he's sold the cattle, even when there's nothing left to lose. Nothing moved but wind. A crow passed overhead, slow wings bowed with effort. No sound but the distant creak of dry bark. The wind changed again, cooler this time, from the west. And with it came the sound. Not a bark, not a growl, something between a whine and a hum, low and vibrating the way old memories do when they settle behind your ribs. Joel followed it, not because he trusted it, but because standing still suddenly felt like the greater risk. He reached the edge of the old stone well. It had collapsed years ago, a dry, dangerous dip in the land now surrounded by broken tools, scorched earth, and weeds twisted like barbed thread. And beside it, nearly hidden in the shadow of a slanted water trough, was the animal. Its body was half-curled, sides heaving. The pouch was gone. In its place, something clung to the animal's leg, thin wire, buried in fur and dried blood. A snare, old style. Illegal now, but people still set them out by the ravine, hoping to trap coyotes or scavengers. Joel's jaw clenched. The animal lifted its head at his approach. No sound, no attempt to flee. He moved slowly, knees cracking again, and settled on one knee. "All right," he muttered. "All right." He didn't expect it to allow the touch, but it did. Its side trembled once, then stilled. The fur was hot and matted. Beneath, the muscle twitched with effort. Joel pulled his old pocket knife, the one he kept on a nail inside the barn, dull but honest, and began working the wire free. The metal cut his knuckle, drew blood, but he didn't stop. The animal didn't flinch. Its eyes were focused beyond him, on something behind, or beneath, or before. When the wire finally fell away, it left a deep groove, flesh bruised, dark. Joel tossed the snare to the side, then wrapped a strip from his own sleeve around the wound. The old cotton-soaked red fast. He sat back, breathing slow, watching the animal settle. It didn't run, it didn't thank him either. It simply lowered its head to the ground, nostrils flaring, ears twitching faintly at the far-off groan of a shifting branch. And then it looked at him again, direct, long, not expectant, not pleading, just a moment held between one breath and the next. Joel stood and turned, ready to head back to gather water or gauze, to do something. But the ground caught his eye again. New tracks, not the same ones from before, smaller, more erratic. The barefoot prints again, but this time clearer. A child's. He froze. There hadn't been children on this land in a long time, not since the fire, not since the night when the sirens wouldn't come, and he'd carried his nephew across the back ridge, coughing smoke and saying nothing, because saying it out loud would make it real. But these prints were fresh, and they lead toward the orchard, what was left of it. Joel glanced back. The animal hadn't moved, but something flickered in its eyes, something unreadable but familiar, like recognition blurred by time, as if it had brought him here on purpose, not just for rescue, but as a message, or a warning. He turned toward the orchard, heart quickening, unsure if he wanted to find what waited beneath those crooked trees. But he took the first step. Behind him, the animal stirred. And far off, from somewhere just past the tree line, came the soft, unmistakable sound of a child coughing. Joel didn't sleep that night. Not truly. He sat on the back steps, wrapped in the same old canvas jacket he used during lambing seasons long past, thumb brushing the edge of the pouch until dawn cooled the edges of the sky. The key lay heavy in his pocket, warming oddly against his leg, like it didn't want to be forgotten. The scrap of paper he tucked into the folds of a seed catalog, afraid of tearing it with too many glances. By the time the first light broke across the eastern ridge, turning the dry hills copper, he'd already made up his mind. He didn't go to the north paddock often anymore. The gate had rusted so clean through in parts that he could peel it back with one hand. Beyond it, the old cattle shed still slouched against the horizon, half sunken at one corner. Joel stepped into it like a man stepping back into a half-lived memory. Everything smelled of old hay and iron. Dust motes drifted like slow snow through the light beams cutting between broken boards. He hadn't thought of this place in years, not since before she fell ill. And yet, something in him had returned to it like instinct. The pouch, the note, still waiting by the steps, but there were no steps here. Not anymore. Just a faint slope of earth, a rotted beam where mice had chewed through the floorboards. Joel knelt, brushed away a curl of debris, and there, behind a loose plank, was a lockbox. His chest tightened. He knew the box, hadn't seen it since the fire. It had belonged to Mara, his wife. She'd kept seeds in it, old letters, coins, from their travels. But when the house burned, he thought it had gone with the rest. And yet here it was, clean, untouched by flame. He tried the key. It slid in stiffly, turned with a groan. Inside a folded flannel, a collar, hers. His hands hovered beneath the fabric. Something metal glinted. A photograph, bent and creased. Joel lifted it with care. In the image, a younger version of himself stood beside Mara, her arm slung over the neck of their shepherd, the same one he buried. And between them, barely visible, was a second dog. Not hers, not his. A younger one, leaner, same posture, same eyes. His mind reeled. A scraping sound startled him. He turned. At the far edge of the shed, where shadow met sun, the dog stood, not the same one from the day before. This one was younger, stronger, coat still sleek, no gray on the muzzle, but the stance was the same, steady, waiting. It stepped into the light, and Joel saw it had something caught in its fur wire maybe, or a piece of fencing. Blood marked its hind leg, dried into the coat in coppery knots. Still, it didn't limp, it didn't whimper, just stood there, silent. Joel crouched slowly, careful not to spook it. The air smelled sharp with old straw and rust. He didn't speak. The dog's eyes were wide but calm, watching then. Second shift, barely a breath behind him. Joel froze. A figure stood just beyond the broken doorframe. Human, still. He couldn't see their face. Just a silhouette against the morning light. A man, perhaps, or a woman. Hard to tell. The dog turned its head but didn't flinch. The figure took one slow step back and disappeared behind the crumbling shed wall. Joel stood abruptly, heart pounding. He stepped into the light, eyes sweeping the field. Nothing, no footsteps, no shadow, no movement. Just the open slope of brittle grass and the sound of insects ticking like old clocks when he turned back. The dog was gone. The collar still lay in the box. The photo too. But next to them now sat something else, something that hadn't been there moments before. A tooth worn smooth at one end. Canine. Not human. Joel stared at it, skin prickling. It wasn't just the item itself, it was how it had been placed. As if laid there with care. With thought. The air had shifted. The sun, once warm and open, now felt pale, filtered. The shed felt smaller. The silence more layered, as if things were listening now. He looked toward the hillside, unsure of what path he'd stepped onto or who had walked it before him. Wind stirred the tall grass outside. A single crow called sharply and fell quiet. The back gate stood open by only a few inches, but it hadn't moved in years. Joel approached it with caution, born not of fear, but of old grief given new shape. The wind had stilled. Even the brittle leaves, scattered around the yard like old letters left unread, seemed to pause. He didn't touch the gate right away, just looked. The wood was damp near the hinges, not rain. Something fresher and faint along the edge of the threshold prints, not the wide stamp of a coyote, not boot tread, smaller, splayed with uneven pressure, familiar, but wrong in a way that needled under the skin. He stepped through. Beyond the paddock was the collapsed barn, half swallowed by undergrowth and disuse. Joel hadn't come back here since the year after he buried her. Too many ghosts, in the way the rafters leaned, like shoulders giving out. Too much memory in the rusted tools still hanging from bent nails. Yet something had passed this way recently. He crouched near the fence post and ran his fingers over a scratch in the soft earth, not claw marks. Something dragged, something carried, then a sound, soft, rhythmless, ruzzling from within the barn. Joel rose slowly, bones tight, and took the long way around the side. No sense barging in. He knew how fear lived in corners. Inside the shadowed barn, the air felt thicker, like it hadn't moved since grief first sealed it shut. Then came the shuffle again, not from within. Above, he tilted his chin upward, just as something dropped to shape, tumbling from the hayloft, landing hard. A yelp, then silence. Not human, but not wild either. He stepped in. The animal lay half, breathing shallow, leg bent at a strange angle. Not the same dog from before, but close. Younger, narrower muzzle, ungrayed, looked up at him without flinching. Its eyes matched hers, not just in color but in that steady, knowing way, as if it recognized more than it should. And around its neck, tied loosely with a rotted string, was the same pouch. Joel knelt, breath catching. The dog didn't move, didn't snarl or shy, just waited. He reached out, slow, and touched the pouch. Inside this time, a small shard of ceramic, pale blue, hand-painted, broken along one edge. Joel stared. He hadn't seen that pattern since his wife was alive. Her favorite mug, cracked during the move back from hospice. He'd meant to glue it, never found the time. It had vanished during the cleanup, when the volunteers had packed her things while he stood in the yard, with fists full of dog fur, and didn't know how to stop shaking. But this piece, it wasn't just similar. It was the piece. He looked back at the dog. Its breathing was shallow, ribs fluttering like dry leaves in wind. "What are you?" he murmured, not expecting an answer. Outside, the light changed. Not sunset yet, but a strange deepening of tone, the kind that happens before a storm, when clouds begin to fold into themselves. Thunder in the belly of the horizon, not yet speaking. He scooped the dog up. It didn't resist, but its body twitched involuntarily, the injured legs stiff with pain. As he crossed the field back toward the house, a gust caught the gate and slammed it shut behind him. He paused and noticed something in the dirt. A second set of prints. Larger, wilder, deep and deliberate. Not from the dog. Joel didn't linger inside. He cleared the old bench by the fireplace and laid the dog down on a folded towel. He hadn't prepared a space for anything living in years, not since the last set of paws went quiet in this house. But his hands remembered the motion, the way a damp cloth should feel, the way to whisper without words that pain would pass. Maybe. The dog watched him through half-lidded eyes. No fear, just waiting. Thunder, distant now but firmer, rolled across the hills. He turned back toward the table. The pouch still sat where he'd left it. He opened it again, thinking maybe he'd missed something. Inside, tucked behind the ceramic shard, was another scrap of paper. Older this time, fragile. But he knew the writing. It was his own. "If I forget, bring her back." Joel dropped the paper. He didn't remember writing it, not exactly, but somewhere beneath the weight of years. Beneath grief and sleep and the forgetting that comes with time, something stirred. A memory of holding that pouch, of writing those words in the weeks after the funeral, During the nights he couldn't sleep, a desperate ritual, a plea, and now it had returned. Not in the mouth of a ghost, but in the jaws of something real. Something breathing, something broken. Outside a second roll of thunder crept closer, this one accompanied by the distant crunch of gravel. Not tires, not boots. Claws. Joel didn't move for a long time. The wind had thickened outside, slow and muffled like breath. Behind a curtain rain threatened, but never arrived. He sat beside the dog's still frame on the towel, his palm resting lightly against its flank, feeling each fragile rise and fall. A part of him had braced for something louder, howls, panic, confrontation, but the silence held, deeper than quiet, like the land itself had paused to see what he'd do next. He rose only when the clouds shifted and a thin shaft of light cut through the barn window, brief, angled, gold as dust. In that flicker, something moved near the fence line. Just a shadow, the same as before, or maybe not. But this time he didn't follow. He wrapped a shard and the note in the pouch and hung it carefully on the hook by the stove. The hook had once held her leash, then a lantern, then nothing for years. He didn't plan to move it again. The dog stirred, not a cry, just a small twitch. A reminder that pain didn't always announce itself. Joel knelt again, tracing along the joint that had twisted in the fall. He couldn't fix it, not entirely, but he could help it heal slowly if it wanted to, and he still hadn't decided if he'd name it. It was too soon to assign meaning to. Something that might only stay a while, but it didn't feel like a visitor. Not anymore. It had brought him something more permanent than itself, memory, reshaped, guilt, returned in the form of a choice, the kind he'd once asked to be spared from, only to learn years later that even silence carries responsibility. He'd written that note, not as a message to someone else, but to himself. If I forget, bring her back. He had forgotten not the woman or the dog, not completely, but the part of himself that used to trust that grief could soften into something useful. That time wasn't just a thing to survive, but a path towards different understanding. Sometimes that understanding arrived quietly, limping through the back gate with a threadbare pouch and no explanation. By dusk, the dog had eaten, only a little, but enough to stay. Joel left the door open as he stepped outside, listening to the wind scrape along the edge of the old trough. In the distance, the gate creaked again, not swinging, just murmuring in its hinges. It didn't feel like a warning, more like permission. He walked toward the stones. The place where he'd buried her was overgrown now. Wild grasses curved over the flat rocks like sleeping limbs. He didn't clear them away, just stood with his hands in his coat pockets, chin lowered. The wind lifted gently, and in it he thought he could smell the faintest trace of rain damp. Not memory, not imagination, just the echo of something that once had weight. Behind him, the dog limped to the edge of the field and stood there, watching, not approaching, not retreating. Joel didn't call it over. Some distances weren't meant to be closed all at once. The light dipped lower. The trees at the edge of the property softened, their outlines blurring into one another. It was the hour when things began to disappear, slowly at first, then completely. Joel exhaled, long and even, and looked back once more. The dog was turning, away now, not to leave, but to rest. It curled in the grass not far from the stones, nose tucked, ears slack. The wind moved around it like it belonged. Joel watched until his eyes adjusted to the dark. No fear, no need for answers. Only a quiet knowing that some returns weren't meant to solve a mystery, but to offer a decision, not to undo the past, but to carry it differently. And when he finally stepped away from the burial stones, he did so without touching them. He left the grass bent, the dust undisturbed. The wind stirred once more, then gently settled.